Bill Barr is out as Attorney General, his last day next week. Barr, he carried Trump's water. He politicized the Justice Department for years, but he got on the president's bad side after the AG said there wasn't widespread election fraud. After that, his days, many thought, were numbered. Top Democrats wasted no time kicking dirt on Barr. Adam Schiff, one of the key figures during the impeachment, tweeted, Barr, quote, lied to cover for Trump. He launched political investigations. He subverted justice and the rule of law. Steny Hoyer, the House Majority Leader, said Barr diminished the integrity of his office and eroded the independence of the Justice Department. And Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, one of the top Democrats on the Judiciary Committee, he says, quote, there should be no sympathy or regret for an Attorney General who trashed the rule of law. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Now, once Barr leaves, his deputy, Jeffrey Rosen, he will take the reins of the Justice Department. And the big question is, what could Rosen do with his newfound power and with albeit a limited amount of time? He could appoint a special counsel to investigate Hunter Biden as an example. Some say he could cause even more mischief. Well, joining me now, someone uniquely qualified to discuss this, Nelson Cunningham, former counsel to President Clinton, also a former federal prosecutor and a former general counsel of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And you know, Nelson, before I even get into the Barr obit politically and then what comes after, you've seen how this town operates and how a typical election works or not. Was there a moment in the 42 days, I guess, since the election and today, where you think things might have gone sideways, whether it be a court ruling, whether it be, you know, those who would have accommodated Trump's coup instincts on the Hill or state electors? Were you ever worried, or were you convinced it was when, not if, logic would prevail?
Oh, good to see you, and thanks for having me on. I did have a moment of concern. It was about 3 weeks ago when it was announced that Trump had called various Republican legislators from the state of Michigan to come to the White House to meet with them, to argue to them that they should ignore the Electoral College vote. They should ignore the vote of the vote of their citizens and should instead put a parallel slate of electors in. I thought to myself, oh boy, that is new, that is different, that does not depend on actual findings of fraud or of irregularities. That's just a naked political claim on the loyalty of these Republican state legislators. And I worried if they had caved and then other state legislators had begun to cave, it could have gone the wrong way.
You know, Nelson, we talked about this at the top, but 2/3 of the Republican House members and 18 state attorney generals, they signed on to that FACACTA letter, despite, you know, 50 some odd court rulings that confirmed what we all knew, that there wasn't widespread fraud, and that Biden won an election that at the end of the day, from the popular vote and from the electoral count, wasn't really close. Do you think the fever breaks now, or are you concerned, you know, just because the inevitable finally took root, we are dealing with a situation where we're going to have to rethink, so we don't go through this in 2 or 4 years, that an election and there's election, there's a winner and there's a loser, and whether we like the result or not, we have to accept the result for what it is, reality. Where will we be in 2 or 4 years, and do we have to do something before then to make sure we don't go through this insanity?
Look, I think it's important to note what is really happening here. This is not just about this election, although it's certainly in Trump's vision about this election. But why are all these Republicans jumping on board? It's because they want to fan the flames that there is voter fraud, there are voter irregularities, that absentee votes are bad, that mail-in voting broadly is bad, that early voting is bad. We need to get back to the good old days where people showed up on that Tuesday and voted. We counted the votes that night. This has been part of a decades-long Republican pushback on Democratic efforts to expand the voting franchise. And it's pretty clear to me that so many Republicans have signed on to all these, frankly, meritless claims because it helps them build the political case in the months and years ahead that they have to shrink the franchise and make it harder for voters, not easier. So this is just the opening chapter of in 2 years, we will have seen a lot of states take up legislation to roll back the openings that we saw this year because of the pandemic and make it harder to vote, which is a terrible thing for democracy, but apparently Republicans think it's a good thing for them.
Nelson, for the life of me, and I've spoken to people that have worked with Bill Barr over the years in different capacities, he actually had a resume. There's some bit players that have come through here that, you know, this was by far the highlight of their political careers. Ill-equipped though they might be, they clearly had to have fealty to the president since no one else would have put them in these positions. Bill Barr is different. He was an AG. He was someone in Washington. For the life of you, can you explain why he contorted himself to the degrees he did and prostituted a reputation that even if people didn't agree with some of his political leanings, they thought he was certainly capable? Look how he leaves now. Can you make, for the life of you, why he would do what he did?
You know, I don't know Attorney General Barr personally, although I certainly know people who know him and who worked with him back in the Bush years and then some more recently. You know, I think he was motivated by one thing: judges. And as long as he could keep on feeding a pipeline of Federalist Society, uber conservative judges and justices to the U.S. Senate and get them confirmed by Mitch McConnell, I think he felt that probably made up for all the other crow that he had to eat as Donald Trump's Attorney General. I think he will look back on his tenure, and the thing he'll be proudest of are the things that he did to shift the federal judiciary dramatically to the right. Now, is that ultimately at the end of the day worth the price to his reputation? I wouldn't think so. But for him, that may be all he needs. He's a deeply conservative, religious jurist. He has made it clear in his speeches he's so motivated by religious conservatism. That's what he's about, and that's what he accomplished in his tenure as Attorney General.
Jeff Rosen will take over now. There's 36 days left. Is this simply a placeholder, or could there be, as I said, mischief a little over a month before Trump is forced to leave?
Well, you know, Rosen is a very unusual leader for the department. He's never been a federal prosecutor. He was never a lower level employee of the department. He was a civil litigator at a big Washington firm, Kirkland & Ellis, which was also Kenneth Starr's firm and Brett Kavanaugh's firm, and the cradle for a lot of conservative lawyers. But he was a civil litigator. He was at the Department of Transportation as a lawyer. He was at the Office of OMB as a lawyer. But this is his first time at DOJ. So he does not bring the instincts of a prosecutor. He does not bring the instincts of somebody who has been long associated with the department. He is, by reputation, a serious, solid man. But will he be a pushover when Donald Trump pushes? It's a little hard to know right yet.
Nelson, you know, there's both a philosophical and a practical debate about when Trump is gone, what kind of exposure or pursuit there should be of him, and we expect there'll be a bevy of pardons on the way out the door, certainly for the first family, whether he tries to pardon himself and how that'll work its way through the courts as to whether he can or not, or he steps down and has Vice President Pence do it for him. Regardless, he can't immunize himself at the state level. We know what awaits him seemingly at both the AG for New York and then also even the New York City District Attorney in Manhattan. Do you think it's healthy for the country to find out if there is criminality, the scope of what the president did, and hold him to account? Do you think it's time, seemingly what Biden wants, at least on the federal level, to move on? Or even if it's not a criminal pursuit, that we should open up the books and find the true extent about abuse of power? What is in the national best interest, do you think, and how much trouble do you think Trump might be in, both in terms of personal embarrassment and maybe even exposure?
You know, I spend a lot of time, have spent a lot of time in recent years dealing with governments overseas, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa. And in those countries, it's very common for presidents, after they leave, or prime ministers, to be prosecuted and spend time in jail. That's the definition of a banana republic. I think it's time for the United States to stop being a banana republic. The notion of federal authorities clapping a former president in irons is one that would only diminish and hurt the United States internationally. Here's how I would split the baby. I think Joe Biden, my old boss, is right to say that the feds should not be prosecuting Donald Trump. We shouldn't have the federal government going after former presidents. It's a terrible precedent to have. Let's let New York State do it. Let's let Cyrus Vance do it. Donald Trump was a businessman in New York. He made his bed in New York. Whatever crimes he committed, he made there. Let New York deal with it. Let them deal with the state crimes from before Donald Trump's time as president of the United States. And let's close the chapter on the Trump years federally and move on.
Nelson, I appreciate, as always, the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we've gotten some heavy stuff so far in the program. When we come back, we will lighten things up a bit. We're going to turn over to the late night host. They had some fun as one administration comes to an end and the next one begins. We'll be right back.